I am Milton, 65 years old, retired factory supervisor who spent 4 decades providing for a family that no longer exists. Now I live alone in a modest house in suburban Michigan, surrounded by faded photos and empty rooms. My life was ordinary until that morning when 2 police officers showed up at my doorstep with news that shattered my world. They told me my son Jason was dead. At that moment, my heart stopped beating. What they could not know was that my 34-year-old son had moved back home last year. I still remember tucking him in as a child, his small hand in mine. Before I tell you how my world collapsed that morning, let me know where you are watching from and hit that subscribe button. You will want to see what happened when I checked my son's room minutes later. My story really begins long before those officers knocked on my door. For 40 years, I worked at the Holbrook manufacturing plant in Westland. Started on the assembly line when I was 22 and eventually worked my way up to floor supervisor. It was not a glamorous job, but it paid the bills and gave my family security. Every morning at 4:30, I would drag myself out of bed, pack my lunch, and drive 20 miles to the factory. My hands were always calloused, my back perpetually sore, but I never complained. That was what men of my generation did. We worked hard so our families could have better lives than we had. Diane and I married young. I was 23, she was 21. We were high school sweethearts who thought love would be enough. Jason came along 2 years later. The moment I held that tiny boy in my arms, I made a silent promise to give him everything I never had. My own father abandoned us when I was 12, leaving my mother to raise 4 kids on a waitress's salary. I swore Jason would never know that kind of hardship or absence. Those early years were tough but happy. Our little ranch house was always filled with laughter. I would come home exhausted from work, but somehow find energy to play catch in the backyard or help Jason with his science projects. Diane worked part-time as a dental receptionist, but she was primarily a stay-at-home mom. We were not wealthy, but we were comfortable. We were a family. Jason was a smart kid, always reading, asking questions about how things worked. His teachers said he had real potential. By the time he was in high school, he was getting straight A's and talking about becoming an engineer or maybe going into finance. I was so proud, thinking he would have opportunities I could only dream of. When he got accepted to the University of Michigan with a partial scholarship, I nearly burst with pride. Even though the scholarship did not cover everything, I told him not to worry. I would figure it out. And figure it out, I did. Took on extra shifts at the plant, cut back on every unnecessary expense, even picked up weekend work doing maintenance at the local mall. For 4 years, I worked 70-hour weeks. My knees started giving me trouble, and the doctor said my blood pressure was concerning, but I brushed it all aside. My son was getting a college education. That was all that mattered. The trouble started after Jason graduated. He got a good job at a financial firm in Detroit, making more money his first year than I made after 20 years at the plant. He bought fancy suits, leased a luxury car, moved into an expensive downtown apartment. I was happy for him, even though he rarely called or visited anymore. I told myself he was busy building his career. That was what I had worked so hard to give him after all. The freedom to succeed. Then Diane left. After 32 years of marriage, she sat me down at our kitchen table and told me she did not love me anymore. Had not for years, apparently. She had met someone else, a dentist she worked for. He had a vacation home in Florida and took her on trips to Europe. All those years I was working double shifts to put Jason through college, she was falling in love with someone else. The divorce nearly broke me financially and emotionally. I kept the house but had to refinance it. Most of my retirement savings went to the settlement. For several years, I lived alone, throwing myself into work until my retirement 5 years ago. Jason would call occasionally, usually when he needed something. A loan for a new car. Money to invest in some cannot miss opportunity. Advice when he was going through a bad breakup. I always came through for him, happy for any connection, any chance to feel needed. In my lonelier moments, I would tell myself that someday, when I was old and frail, he would return the favor. He would take care of me the way I had taken care of him. Then about a year ago, Jason showed up at my door with 2 suitcases and a story about needing a place to stay temporarily. His company was downsizing, he said. He just needed a few weeks to get back on his feet. I welcomed him with open arms, turning my home office back into his bedroom. Those first few weeks were almost pleasant. We ate dinner together, watched baseball games, caught up on each other's lives. I thought maybe this was a blessing in disguise, a chance to rebuild our relationship. But weeks turned into months. Jason rarely left the house during the day, claiming he was sending out resumes and taking online classes. But he went out most nights, coming home at odd hours, sometimes smelling of alcohol. He borrowed my car without asking. Small amounts of cash started disappearing from my wallet. When I tried to talk to him about job prospects, he would get defensive or change the subject. The night before, everything changed. Jason came home at 3 in the morning, clearly intoxicated. I was up waiting for him, worried sick, after he had not answered my calls. When I confronted him, he exploded, accusing me of treating him like a child, of suffocating him. Words were exchanged, ugly words we could never take back. "You are just like Mom said," he slurred. A control freak who never accomplished anything worthwhile. That cut deep, deeper than he knew. I went to bed that night wondering where I had gone wrong, how the sweet boy I had sacrificed everything for had turned into this angry, entitled stranger sleeping under my roof. Sleep did not come easily as I stared at the ceiling, feeling used and unappreciated after decades of sacrifice. I must have dozed off eventually, but my dreams were troubled and dark. The morning that changed everything started like any other. I woke up at 6:30, my body still programmed for the factory schedule, even years into retirement. Jason's door was closed as I passed by on my way to the kitchen. I assumed he was still sleeping off last night's drinks. The coffee maker gurgled as I stared out the kitchen window, watching the sprinklers come on in my neighbor's yard. The argument from the night before was still fresh, a bitter taste in my mouth. My morning routine was sacred. Coffee, toast with peanut butter, the crossword puzzle from yesterday's newspaper that I saved for morning. Small comforts in a life that had grown increasingly smaller. I was halfway through the crossword, stuck on 9 across, when the doorbell rang. Strange. I rarely got visitors, especially not at 7:15 in the morning. Through the peephole, I saw 2 police officers standing on my porch. My first thought was that Jason was in trouble again. Maybe a DUI on his way home last night. Or an unpaid parking ticket. I opened the door, already preparing excuses and apologies. "Mr. Thompson," the male officer asked. He was young, probably around Jason's age, with a military-style haircut and solemn eyes. "Yes, that is me," I replied, noticing the female officer beside him. Something about their expressions made my stomach clench. "May we come in, sir?" the female officer asked. Her voice was gentle but professional. "We have something we need to discuss with you." I stepped aside, leading them into my living room. The house suddenly seemed shabby through their eyes. Old furniture, outdated carpet, the slight mustiness of a place inhabited by a solitary older man. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the couch while I took my recliner. My father's recliner, actually. One of the few things I had inherited from him. The female officer, whose nameplate read Rodriguez, sat forward slightly. "Mr. Thompson, I am afraid we have some difficult news." Time seemed to slow down. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock, the distant sound of a lawnmower starting up next door. "It is about your son, Jason Thompson," she continued. "We regret to inform you that he was found deceased early this morning." The words hung in the air, incomprehensible. Deceased. My son. Jason. The room seemed to tilt slightly. "There must be some mistake," I said, my voice sounding far away. "Jason lives here. With me." The officers exchanged a glance. The male officer, Davis, according to his nameplate, spoke next. "Sir, there was a fatal hit-and-run accident on Highway 14 around 4:30 this morning. The victim was carrying identification belonging to Jason Thompson, with this address listed. The vehicle fled the scene, but witnesses have provided a description." My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of what they were saying. What kind of identification? How do you know it was him? "The victim had a wallet containing your son's driver's license, credit cards, and a gym membership, all in the name of Jason Thompson," Officer Rodriguez explained. "Based on the ID and physical description, we have reason to believe the deceased is your son. We will need you to make a formal identification, but we wanted to notify you in person first." I was having trouble breathing. Images of Jason flashed through my mind. Jason at 5 learning to ride a bike. Jason at 12 proudly showing me his science fair ribbon. Jason at 18 in his graduation cap and gown. Jason last night, his face contorted with anger as he stumbled up the stairs. "The medical examiner has the body," Officer Davis was saying. "They will need to perform an autopsy, but preliminary findings suggest the injuries from the impact were catastrophic, and death was instantaneous. He would not have suffered." They kept talking words about funeral arrangements and investigations and procedures, but they washed over me like white noise. My body felt numb, disconnected. This could not be real. It could not be happening. Then a memory surfaced, sharp and clear. The sound of the front door opening and closing very late. After my argument with Jason. After I had gone to bed. Could Jason have gone out again, but then who came home? "Would you excuse me for just a moment?" I said, interrupting whatever Officer Rodriguez was saying. "I need to check something." They looked concerned but nodded. I rose on unsteady legs and made my way down the hallway to Jason's room. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I put my hand on the doorknob, hesitating. If they were right, this room would be empty. My son would be gone forever. I would be truly alone. I pushed the door open. The door swung open to reveal my son's bedroom cluttered with laundry and empty energy drink cans. And there, in the middle of the unmade bed, was Jason sleeping soundly. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his face relaxed in sleep, one arm flung over his head, just like when he was a little boy. I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. Relief and confusion collided in my mind like opposing weather fronts. My knees nearly buckled. "Jason," I whispered, then louder. "Jason." He stirred, groaned, and rolled over, pulling a pillow over his head. "Go away, Dad. It is too early." I rushed to the bed and grabbed his shoulder, shaking him roughly. "Jason, wake up. The police are here. They said you are dead." That got his attention. He sat up groggily, hair sticking up in all directions, eyes bleary with sleep. "What are you talking about? What police?" "There are 2 officers in our living room who just told me you were killed in a hit-and-run accident early this morning." I explained, my voice trembling. "They have your ID, your wallet." Jason's face changed alarm, replacing confusion. He patted his pockets, then looked around the room frantically. "My wallet! Where is my wallet?" "That is what you are worried about. Did you not hear what I said? The police think you are dead?" I heard movement behind me and turned to see both officers standing in the doorway, hands hovering near their weapons, expressions incredulous. "This is my son, Jason," I said unnecessarily. "As you can see, he is very much alive." Officer Rodriguez recovered first. "Sir, can you state your full name for the record?" Jason stood up wearing only boxers and a t-shirt. "Jason Milton Thompson. What the hell is going on? Do you have any identification on you, Mr. Thompson?" Officer Davis asked, his voice tight with suspicion. Jason looked around the room, increasingly agitated. "No, I cannot find my wallet. I must have misplaced it last night." "Or someone stole it," Officer Rodriguez suggested. She turned to her partner. "We need to contact the scene investigators immediately." Officer Davis was already on his radio, stepping out into the hallway to report this unexpected development. I could hear him requesting information about the victim's fingerprints and any other identification methods. "If someone is using your ID, we need to figure out who the deceased individual is," Officer Rodriguez explained. "Can you tell us your whereabouts last night, Mr. Thompson?" Jason ran his hands through his hair, looking increasingly nervous. "I was out with some friends. Got home late. Ask my dad." I nodded. "He came home around 3 in the morning. We had an argument and then he went to bed." Officer Rodriguez was taking notes. "And you are certain he did not leave the house again afterward?" I hesitated. "I went to bed after our argument. I suppose he could have gone out again, but I heard someone come home very late." Jason shot me an unreadable look. "I did not go out again. I crashed hard. Been here all night." Officer Davis returned, his expression grim. "Medical examiner confirms the victim's fingerprints do not match any in the system. They are working on dental records, but that will take time. Meanwhile, we need to figure out who had your wallet, sir." He addressed Jason directly now. "When did you last see it?" Jason sat back down on the bed, shoulders slumped. "I do not know. Maybe I left it at the bar last night." Something in his tone made my parental instincts flare up. He was lying. I knew my son well enough to recognize when he was hiding something. "Jason, this is serious," I said. "Someone is dead. Someone who had your identification. You need to tell the truth." The officers spent another 20 minutes questioning Jason, but his answers became increasingly vague and contradictory. He claimed he could not remember which bar he had been at, could not name the friends he had been with, could not recall when he had last used his wallet. After conferring quietly, the officers informed us they would need Jason to come to the station later to make a formal statement. They also warned us that there would likely be a more thorough investigation, given the suspicious circumstances. As they were leaving, Officer Rodriguez handed me her card. "Call if you remember anything else. And Mr. Thompson," she hesitated, "you might want to be careful. If someone has your son's ID and was killed while using it, this might not be a simple hit and run." After they left, I turned to Jason, my initial relief at finding him alive now replaced by growing anger and suspicion. "What is going on, and do not lie to me." Jason avoided my eyes, pacing the room like a caged animal. "Nothing. Some guy probably stole my wallet at the bar. Bad luck for him getting hit by a car." The police do not seem to think it was that simple. Neither do I. You have been acting strange for months, secretive, coming and going at all hours. Now someone with your ID is dead. I want the truth, Jason." My son glared at me, the same defiant expression he had worn as a teenager when caught in a lie. "You would not understand. Just stay out of it, okay? It has nothing to do with you." But as I would soon discover, it had everything to do with me. And the truth would be far more devastating than anything I could have imagined. The two detectives who arrived later that morning were nothing like the patrol officers who had delivered the death notification. Detective Morales was a heavy-set man with salt and pepper hair and eyes that missed nothing. His partner, Detective Wei, was a petite woman whose soft-spoken manner belied a razor-sharp intelligence. They did not bring coffee or speak in gentle tones. They brought search warrants and questions that cut to the bone. "Mr. Thompson," Morales addressed me as we sat at my kitchen table. "We need to understand exactly what has been going on in this house. The deceased individual found with your son's identification has been tentatively identified as Raymond Laszlo, a man with an extensive criminal record, including fraud, identity theft, and connections to organized gambling operations." I looked at Jason, who was staring at the table, knuckles white as he gripped his coffee mug. "I have never heard that name before." "That is interesting," Detective Wei said, "because according to Mr. Laszlo's cell phone records, he and your son exchanged dozens of texts and calls over the past 3 months. Jason's head snapped up. "You checked his phone already?" "It survived the accident," Morales confirmed, "and gave us quite a picture of your relationship with Mr. Laszlo. Care to explain?" Jason remained silent, but I could see beads of sweat forming on his forehead. "Let me help you out," Wei continued, opening a folder. "Based on the texts we recovered, it appears you owe a significant amount of money to some very dangerous people. Mr. Laszlo was acting as an intermediary, collecting payments and negotiating extensions." "Jason," I turned to my son, shock washing over me. "Is this true?" Before he could answer, Morales slid several documents across the table toward me. "Mr. Thompson, we have reason to believe your son has not been truthful about his employment situation either. According to these records, Jason was terminated from Meridian Financial Group 8 months ago for suspected embezzlement. The company opted not to press charges in exchange for his resignation and partial restitution." The room seemed to tilt again, just as it had when the officers told me Jason was dead. In some ways, this felt worse. My son, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, had been lying to me. For months, perhaps years. "That cannot be right," I protested weakly, even as Jason's expression confirmed it was. "We have more," Wei said gently. "With your permission, we would like to search your son's room and any areas of the house he has had access to. We believe he may have been involved in additional illegal activities." I nodded numbly, no longer certain of anything. The detectives disappeared down the hallway, with Jason leaving me alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the shattered pieces of what I had thought was my life. An hour later, they emerged with several bags of evidence: computer equipment, financial documents, and most disturbingly, items I recognized as mine that had gone missing over the past months. My father's gold watch, my late mother's pearl earrings meant for my future daughter-in-law, several bonds I had been saving for emergencies. "Dad, I can explain." Jason started, but Detective Morales cut him off. "Mr. Thompson, we found evidence that your son has been selling your possessions to cover gambling debts. We also discovered multiple sets of identification documents with your personal information, but different names. It appears he has been using your identity to open credit accounts." The betrayal cut deep, a wound more painful than anything I had experienced before. My identity. My own son has been stealing my identity. "It gets worse," Wei said, her voice genuinely sympathetic. "Based on documents we found and our interview with your son, it appears he gave his wallet to Raymond Laszlo last night as collateral for a debt extension. Mr. Laszlo was likely on his way to meet with the people Jason owes money to when he was killed." Jason finally broke his silence, words tumbling out in a desperate rush. "They were going to hurt me, Dad. I owed them $50,000 from poker games. Laszlo said they were sending someone to teach me a lesson. I gave him my wallet with my ID and $2,000 cash as a good faith payment. He was supposed to buy me more time. And now he is dead, Morales said flatly. Hit by a vehicle that witnesses describe as a black SUV with tinted windows. No attempt to brake. No accident. The implication hung heavy in the air. This was no random hit and run. This was a deliberate act. Someone had killed the man they believed was Jason. We have reason to believe your son may be in danger, Wei explained to me. And possibly you as well if these people discover their mistake. They will find out soon enough, Morales added grimly. We need to know everything, Jason. Names, amounts, locations. If you cooperate fully, it will help with the charges you are facing. Charges, I echoed. Identity theft, fraud, possible accessory after the fact in Laszlo's death. Potentially others as we continue our investigation. Jason broke down, then sobbing like I had not seen since he was a child. But these were not the tears of an innocent boy with a skinned knee. These were the desperate tears of a man caught in a web of his own making. Finally facing consequences he could not charm or lie his way out of. As the detectives continued questioning him, the full, ugly truth emerged. Jason had lost his job due to embezzling from client accounts to cover gambling debts. Rather than admit this to me, he had created an elaborate fiction, pretending to work remotely, while actually spending his days at casinos or illegal poker games. When his money ran out, he began selling my possessions. When that proved insufficient, he turned to identity theft, first using my information, then branching out to others. The son I thought I knew had become a stranger, a criminal who had preyed on his own father's trust and love. And now a man was dead because of his actions. By the time the detectives left, promising to return with more questions and likely an arrest warrant, I felt hollowed out. Empty. The relief I had felt upon finding Jason alive that morning had evaporated, replaced by a grief almost as profound as if he had actually died. In many ways, the son I thought I had raised was gone. In his place was this selfish, dishonest man who had exploited my love at every turn. As the front door closed behind the detectives, I turned to face my son, no longer certain I knew him at all. How could you do this? My voice shook as I confronted Jason in the living room. The detectives had left us with a warning not to leave town and the promise that they would be back with a warrant for Jason's arrest once they processed the evidence. Jason sat on the couch, head in his hands. You would not understand. You never understood the pressure I was under. Pressure. I nearly shouted the word. What pressure I gave you, everything, every opportunity I worked my fingers to the bone so you could have a better life than I did. He looked up, his face a mask of resentment. That is right, Dad. You are the great martyr. Saint Milton who never let anyone forget his sacrifices. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up with that hanging over my head, the constant reminder that I owed you? His words struck me like physical blows. I never said you owed me anything. I wanted you to have opportunities. No, you wanted me to live the life you thought I should have. College, corporate job, wife, kids, the whole American dream package. Did you ever once ask me what I wanted? You seemed happy with that path. I defended myself. You were proud of your job, your apartment downtown. Jason laughed bitterly. I was proud of escaping this house, of being free from your expectations. The job was just a paycheck. A good one, sure, but mind-numbing. 50 hours a week in a glass tower, moving numbers from one column to another to make rich people richer. So that justifies stealing gambling away. Everything using my identity. Tell me, Jason, when exactly did you decide that crime was an acceptable career alternative? He stood up abruptly, pacing the room. It started small. A poker game after work. I was good at it, Dad. Really good. I could read people calculate odds in my head. I started winning. More money in a night than I made in a week at Meridian. It felt like freedom. Until you started losing, I guessed. His shoulders slumped slightly. Yeah, the house always wins eventually. I borrowed money to cover a bad night, thinking I would win it back. Then borrowed more. Started playing higher stakes games trying to recover. Got in with some guys who did not exactly work through traditional banking channels. Loan sharks, I translated flatly. They prefer private financiers, Jason said with a weak attempt at humor. By the time I realized how deep I was, it was too late. They threatened to break my legs. Worse. So I made some creative financial decisions at work. Just temporarily, I told myself. I would win the money back and replace it before anyone noticed. But they did notice. He nodded. Auditors. They gave me a choice. Resignation and partial repayment or criminal charges. I took the deal, but I still owed the sharks. That is when I came here. I thought I would stay a few weeks, get my head straight, figure out a plan. Instead, you stole from me, I said, the hurt raw in my voice. Your own father. You took things that mattered to me. Family heirlooms. You used my name, my credit. I was desperate, Jason shouted. These are not people you can reason with. Remember that broken window last month that I said was probably neighborhood kids? That was a warning. Next time it would be my arm or your arm. I sank into my recliner, suddenly exhausted. And Raymond Laszlo, the man who died with your wallet. Jason's expression darkened. Ray was their collector. Not a bad guy for what he did. He was trying to help me, actually. Said he could convince them to give me more time if I could give him something as security. I offered my wallet with ID and $2,000 cash inside. He was supposed to tell them he had collateral from me that I was good for the rest. Instead, someone ran him down thinking he was you. My son's face drained of color. Yeah. And now they know they got the wrong guy. They will be coming for me. For us. As if on cue, a car drove slowly past the house. Dark SUV tinted windows, just like the witnesses had described. Jason saw it too, moving away from the windows. We need to get out of here. Now. The police said not to leave, I reminded him. The police cannot protect us, he hissed. These guys have people everywhere, cops on payroll. We need to run. The phone rang, startling us both. I moved to answer it, but Jason grabbed my wrist. Do not. It could be them. The answering machine picked up after 4 rings. A man's voice, calm and professional, filled the room. Jason Thompson. We had an arrangement. Ray was bringing your payment and assurances. Now Ray is dead, and our patience is at an end. The debt has doubled. 100,000 by midnight, or we start collecting in other ways. Perhaps beginning with your father. The message ended, leaving us in silence, broken only by the sound of our breathing. See? Jason's voice was frantic. We need to go, now. I have some money stashed. Not much, but enough to get us out of state. I looked at my son, Shirley looked at him, and saw a stranger. A man willing to lie, steal, and run rather than face consequences. A man who had put both our lives in danger through his selfishness and poor choices. In that moment, something broke in me. Or perhaps something healed. The scales fell from my eyes, and I saw clearly for the first time in decades. No, I said quietly. Jason blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean no. I am not running. I am not giving you more money. I am not enabling this anymore. Dad, they will kill us. His voice rose in panic. Then we go to the police, we tell them everything, we get protection. Jason laughed bitterly. Protection, witness protection, maybe if we are lucky. New identities, new lives, always looking over our shoulders. Is that what you want? What I want? I said, rising from my chair, is for my son to finally take responsibility for his actions instead of running from them. Fine, he snapped. You stay. Commit suicide by loan shark. I am getting out of here. He stormed upstairs. I heard drawers opening and closing, the sounds of hasty packing. I remained in the living room, mind racing. The detectives had left their cards. I could call them, tell them about the threat. But Jason was right about one thing. There might not be time for official protection to be arranged. 10 minutes later, Jason came downstairs with a duffel bag. Last chance, Dad. Come with me. We can start fresh somewhere. There is no starting fresh when you are running from your mistakes, son. His expression hardened. Then I need cash. Whatever you have in the house. And your car keys. No. The word was easier to say the second time. Something dangerous flashed in Jason's eyes. I was not asking. He moved toward the drawer where I kept emergency cash. I stepped in front of it. I said, no, Jason. For once in your life, you need to face consequences without me rescuing you. Get out of my way, he growled, shoving me aside with enough force that I stumbled against the counter. That was when I saw him pull open the drawer and reach for the metal box inside. My emergency fund. Nearly $8,000 I had been saving for years. My safety net in case of serious illness or home repairs. Something snapped inside me. Decades of sacrifice, of putting my son first, of making excuses for his behavior, all crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I lunged forward and grabbed his arm. Put it back, Jason. Now. He tried to shake me off, but despite my age, years of factory work had left me stronger than I looked. We struggled, the cash box between us, until Jason shoved me hard. I fell back, hitting my head on the edge of the counter. Pain exploded behind my eyes, and I felt warm wetness trickling down my temple. The sight of my blood seemed to shock Jason back to reality. He stood frozen, the cash box clutched to his chest, staring at me with something like horror. Dad, I did not mean to. I touched my temple, fingers coming away red. But you did. Just like you meant to steal from me, to lie to me, to use me. It stops now, Jason. With shaking hands, I reached for the phone and dialed 911. What are you doing? Jason's voice cracked with panic. Calling the police. You assaulted me, tried to rob me, and there are people threatening both our lives. We need help. They will arrest me. He looked wild-eyed, desperate. Yes, I agreed sadly. They probably will. And maybe that is the help you really need right now. The operator came on the line. As I reported what had happened, I watched my son collapse onto the kitchen floor, the fight finally gone out of him. He put his head in his hands and began to sob deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from his very core. By the time police and paramedics arrived, Jason was talking. Really talking, perhaps for the first time in years, about the gambling, the debts, the threats, about how scared and ashamed he had been, how he had dug himself deeper with each lie until he could no longer see a way out. As the officers led him to the squad car, he looked back at me standing in the doorway with a bandage on my temple. I am sorry, Dad, he said, his voice small, for everything. I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. In the strangest way, this felt like the most honest moment we had shared in years. It had taken rock bottom for my son to finally tell the truth. The detective who had taken my statement approached as the squad car pulled away. We will need to move you to a safe location, Mr. Thompson, until we can apprehend the individuals who made these threats. I watched the taillights of the police car disappear around the corner, taking my son to jail and an uncertain future. Whatever you need to do, I said. I am done running from hard truths. That night was the loneliest of my life. After giving my statement to police, I was escorted to a motel on the outskirts of town. An officer was stationed outside my door, a precaution, until the people threatening us could be identified and apprehended. The room was clean but generic. Beige walls, floral bedspread, Bible in the drawer. Nothing personal. Nothing of home. It suited my mood. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my reflection in the dark television screen. Who was this old man with the bandaged temple and haunted eyes? How had I gone from believing my son was dead to finding him alive to having him arrested, all in the span of a single day? The detective had explained that Jason was being held on multiple charges: identity theft, fraud, assault. He would appear before a judge in the morning for arraignment and bail hearing, though given the circumstances and the threats against him, bail was unlikely to be granted. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too strict, too lenient? Had my focus on providing materially come at the cost of the emotional guidance he needed? Or was this simply who Jason had chosen to become regardless of my parenting? I thought back to my own childhood, to my father walking out when I was 12. How I had promised myself I would be different. I would stay. I would provide. I would never abandon my child. But perhaps in focusing so intently on not repeating my father's mistakes, I had made new ones of my own. The hours crept by, marked by the periodic shadows of the officer passing by my window. I dozed fitfully, waking from nightmares where I found Jason's room empty, or worse, found him there but lifeless, the police announcement having been prophetic rather than mistaken. Around 3 in the morning, my cell phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. We know where you are. The debt remains. 1 more day. I showed it to the officer who called it in immediately. They increased security, adding another patrol car to the motel parking lot. But we all knew the truth. If these people were as connected and determined as they seemed, no regular police protection would be enough. By dawn, I had made a decision. I could not run forever, could not live looking over my shoulder, and I would not allow these criminals to control my life through fear the way I had allowed Jason's problems to control me through guilt and obligation. When Detective Morales arrived to check on me that morning, I told him my plan. I want to meet with them, settle this. He looked at me like I had lost my mind. Absolutely not. These are dangerous people, Mr. Thompson. Let us handle this. With all due respect, Detective, you do not even know who they are yet. Jason refuses to give names, and meanwhile the clock is ticking on their threat. We are working on identifying them through Laszlo's phone and financial records, he assured me. We will find them. But will you find them before they find me, or some other innocent person they mistake for me or my son? I shook my head. I need to end this, on my terms. Eventually, after hours of discussion and planning, a compromise was reached. I would respond to the text agreeing to meet and pay the debt, but the meeting would be carefully monitored by undercover officers. Every precaution would be taken to ensure my safety while gathering the evidence needed to arrest these individuals. It was risky. Everyone acknowledged that. But sometimes standing your ground is the only way to reclaim your dignity. And dignity was something I desperately needed to recover. Later that day, I was permitted to visit Jason in holding. The sight of my son in an orange jumpsuit separated from me by glass was almost more than I could bear. He looked small, diminished, nothing like the confident financial analyst who had once worn tailored suits and expensive watches. "Dad," his voice came through the phone receiver, tinny and distant. "You should not be here. It is not safe." "I am being careful," I assured him. "The police are providing protection." He laughed bitterly. "The police cannot stop these guys. No one can." "I am meeting with them," I said simply. "Tomorrow, to resolve the debt." Jason's face drained of color. "No, Dad, you cannot. They will kill you. It will be a controlled meeting. Undercover officers everywhere." "You do not understand," he pleaded. "These are not street thugs. They are organized professional. If they suspect a trap—" I leaned forward, meeting his eyes directly. "Then tell the police everything, Jason. Names, locations, how the operation works. Help them build a case that cannot be ignored or dismissed." He glanced around nervously, as if expecting to be overheard even here. "I cannot. They have people everywhere." "More reason to put them away. Your cooperation could mean a reduced sentence, a chance to start over when this is done." Jason pressed his hand against the glass separating us. For a moment I saw a glimpse of the little boy who had once looked at me with unconditional trust and love. "I am sorry," he whispered, "for everything. You deserved better than me for a son." I placed my palm against his, the cold glass between us, a fitting metaphor for the barriers that had grown over the years. "I never needed better, Jason. I just needed you to be honest. With me and with yourself." When I left the detention center, I felt a strange sense of peace. Whatever happened tomorrow, I had finally broken through to my son in a way I had failed to do for years. We had spoken truth to each other, painful as it was. That had to count for something. Back at the motel, I made arrangements with Detective Morales for the meeting. The plan was set. I would return to my house the next day, ostensibly to collect some personal items. The criminals would be contacted and told I had the money. The exchange would take place under heavy surveillance. As I lay in the motel bed that night, I thought about Jason's words. "You deserved better than me for a son." Perhaps we both deserved better than what we had become. A father blinded by his need to be needed. A son trapped in a spiral of lies and self-destruction. But deserving had nothing to do with it. Love was not about deserving. It was about choosing every day to care for someone, even when it was hard. Even when they disappointed you. Even when they broke your heart. Tomorrow I would choose to stand my ground. Not just for Jason's sake, but for my own. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop enabling destructive behavior and start demanding accountability. From others and from yourself. 6 months have passed since that fateful morning when police came to my door with news of my son's death, only for me to find him alive in his bed. 6 months of profound change, painful growth, and unexpected healing. I moved out of the house where I had raised my family. Too many memories, too many ghosts. My new apartment is smaller but brighter, a third-floor unit in a senior living community with a view of a small park. The walls are painted a soft blue that reminds me of the sky on clear spring mornings. I hung only a few photos from my old life, carefully selected moments of genuine happiness rather than obligatory family portraits. Jason is serving 18 months in a minimum security prison. It could have been much worse. His cooperation with authorities led to the arrest of several members of the gambling ring, including the men who had threatened us and who were responsible for Raymond Laszlo's death. In exchange for his testimony, prosecutors reduced some charges and dropped others. The sting operation at my house went better than anyone dared hope. When the criminals arrived expecting to collect their money, they found instead a carefully orchestrated trap. No shots fired, no one injured. Just swift, efficient justice. Detective Morales later told me it was one of the cleanest operations of his career. In the months since I have discovered parts of myself long buried under the weight of obligation and regret. I joined a support group for parents of adult children with addiction issues. Although gambling was Jason's particular demon, the patterns of enabling denial and misplaced guilt were startlingly familiar across all our stories. Through the group, I met Harold, whose daughter struggled with opioid addiction, and Margaret, whose son had been in and out of rehab for alcoholism since college. We began meeting for coffee outside the regular sessions, three battle-scarred parents finding solace in shared experience. Harold introduced me to his weekly chess group at the community center. Margaret invited me to a cooking class for seniors she taught on Thursday evenings. Slowly, steadily, I built a life that was mine, not defined by my role as Jason's father or Diane's ex-husband, but as Milton Thompson, a man with interests, friendships, and quiet joys of his own. I visit Jason once a month. Our conversations are different now, more honest, sometimes painful. He is working with a counselor on his gambling addiction, learning to recognize triggers and develop healthier coping mechanisms. He talks about what he wants to do after his release. Not grand plans for instant success, but modest, achievable goals. Community college classes, a job in bookkeeping, a small apartment of his own. "I want to pay you back, Dad," he told me during my last visit. "For everything I took. The money, the heirlooms, your trust. I know it will take time, but I want to make it right." I nodded, acknowledging his intention without pressuring him. One day at a time, Jason. That is all any of us can do. And it is true. Each day I make choices about how to engage with my son. I listen, I offer encouragement, but I no longer rush to solve his problems or shield him from consequences. Love with boundaries. Support without enabling. It is a delicate balance I am still learning to maintain. The support group taught me about detachment with love, the practice of separating yourself from the problems of your loved one while still caring deeply for them. It taught me that I could not control Jason's choices, only my responses to them. That his addiction and dishonesty were not reflections of my worth as a father, but his own unhealed wounds and poor decisions. Perhaps most surprisingly, I have begun dating again. Nothing serious, just occasional dinners and museum visits with Elaine, a widow I met at one of Margaret's cooking classes. She has silver hair she wears in a neat bob, and a laugh that makes her whole face light up. She understands loss and disappointment, but has not been hardened by them. We take things slowly, enjoying simple pleasures like walking in the park or discussing books over coffee. Life has a rhythm now that is gentler than before. I no longer wake up with that knot of anxiety in my stomach, wondering what crisis Jason might create next. I no longer measure my worth by my son's success or failure. I have learned late in life that I am more than just a father. I am a whole person deserving of peace and joy in my own right. When I think back to that morning when police knocked on my door, I feel an odd sense of gratitude. As painful as the events that followed were, they forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding for years. They shattered illusions I had carefully maintained about my son, my parenting, and myself. And from those broken pieces, I have built something new, something real, something mine. The path of forgiveness has not been easy or straight. There are still days when anger rises up in me, when I remember the lies and theft and betrayal. But I am learning that forgiveness is not a single act, but a daily choice. A choice I make not primarily for Jason's benefit, but for my own. Because holding on to resentment only poisoned my own heart, while changing nothing about the past. What I know now that I did not know 6 months ago is that love does not mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of another's needs. True love has boundaries. It offers support without surrendering self-respect. It encourages accountability rather than enabling dependence. These are hard lessons earned through pain and loss, but I would not trade the clarity they have brought me. As I sit on my small balcony watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I feel a sense of peace that once seemed impossible. Not because everything is perfect, but because I have learned to accept imperfection in myself and in those I love. I have learned that broken things can be beautiful in their own way, and that sometimes what looks like an ending is really a beginning in disguise. If you are watching this and struggling with a loved one's addiction or betrayal, know that you are not alone. Setting boundaries is not abandonment. Demanding accountability is not cruelty. Sometimes the greatest act of love is stepping back and allowing natural consequences to become teachers. Have you ever had to make the difficult choice between enabling someone you love or letting them face the consequences of their actions? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more journeys of resilience and healing. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the hardest paths lead to the most beautiful destinations.